Did you know Americans consume around 10 billion ounces of ketchup every single year, which works out to about 3 bottles per person? It's on nearly every dinner table in the country, and yet almost nobody knows how a fresh tomato becomes that thick, glossy red sauce that pours in slow motion out of a glass bottle. Today, we're following that journey from the tomato field to the factory floor. Ketchup's origins are stranger than you'd think. It didn't start as a tomato product at all. Early versions of ketchup in 17th and 18th century England and Southeast Asia were fermented fish sauces. Tomatoes weren't added until the 1800s in America, and it wasn't until Henry John Heinz began mass-producing tomato ketchup in the late 1800s that it became the standardized, sweet and tangy condiment we recognize today. Heinz remains the dominant ketchup brand in the US, controlling roughly 60% of the market. Step 1. Growing and harvesting the tomatoes. Ketchup starts with a specific variety of tomato bred for processing, not the kind you'd buy whole in a grocery store. These processing tomatoes are grown to be denser, less watery, and higher in natural sugar and acidity, ideal traits for cooking down into a thick sauce. The majority of tomatoes used in American ketchup are grown in California's Central Valley, where hot days and cool nights create perfect ripening conditions. When the tomatoes reach peak ripeness, usually deep red and firm, giant mechanical harvesters roll through the fields, cutting the plants at the base and shaking the tomatoes loose onto conveyor belts built directly into the machine. Optical sorters mounted on the harvester scan each tomato in real time, using color recognition cameras to reject anything green, rotten, or damaged, before the good tomatoes are dropped into trailers for transport. Step 2. Washing and inspection. Because these tomatoes are only harvested within hours of processing to preserve freshness, trucks race them directly to the factory. There, high-pressure water flumes wash away dirt and field debris, while a second round of optical and sometimes manual sorting removes any tomatoes that slipped through with blemishes, mold, or stem fragments still attached. Step 3. Breaking down the tomatoes. The clean tomatoes are fed into massive tanks called breakers, where they're crushed and heated almost immediately. This step matters more than people realize. Heating the tomatoes quickly after crushing deactivates natural enzymes that would otherwise break down pectin and thin out the sauce. Ketchup makers actually control this heating step precisely to decide the final texture: a hot break for a thicker sauce, a cold break for a slightly looser one. Step 4. Pulping and refining. The crushed tomato mixture is pushed through a series of screens with progressively smaller holes, separating out the skins and seeds while collecting the smooth pulp, called tomato paste at this stage. This paste is intensely concentrated, far thicker than what ends up in the bottle, and is sometimes stored in aseptic tanks or barrels if it's not going straight into ketchup production that same day. Step 5. The cook, where the recipe comes together. This is where tomato paste actually becomes ketchup. The concentrated paste is pumped into industrial cookers along with vinegar, sugar, salt, and a blend of spices, commonly including onion powder, garlic powder, and warming spices like clove or allspice, depending on the exact recipe. The mixture is heated and continuously stirred under vacuum in massive kettles, which allows the sauce to thicken by evaporating excess water without needing extremely high heat that could scorch the sugar or dull the tomato flavor. Have you ever noticed ketchup pours painfully slowly, then suddenly all at once? That's not a design flaw, it's chemistry. Ketchup is what's called a non-Newtonian fluid, meaning it behaves like a thick gel until enough force is applied, then it suddenly flows like a liquid. If that fact just saved you from blaming the bottle, smash that like button. Step 6. Quality control and consistency testing. Before the batch moves forward, Samples are pulled and tested for viscosity using specialized instruments that measure exactly how thick the sauce is, ensuring every bottle from every batch pours at the same speed and coats fries the same way, whether it was made this week or 6 months ago. pH levels are also checked closely, both for flavor consistency and food safety, since the right acidity helps preserve the ketchup without needing artificial preservatives. Step 7. Filling and packaging. The finished ketchup is cooled slightly, then pumped into filling machines that measure out precise volumes into bottles, whether that's the classic glass bottle, the squeezable plastic bottle, or single-serve packets used at restaurants. Bottles are filled from the bottom up in many factories, a method that reduces air bubbles getting trapped in the thick sauce. Caps are applied, sealed, and inverted briefly so the hot ketchup itself helps sterilize the inside of the cap before the bottles are labeled and boxed for shipping. A single large-scale ketchup plant can bottle hundreds of thousands of bottles a day during peak tomato season, running almost continuously from midsummer through fall, when fresh tomatoes are at their most abundant. Glass bottle, squeeze bottle, or packet? Which one do you actually prefer? Drop your answer below. Now, let's finish today's journey with something a little sweeter and a lot stretchier. Bubblegum. Did you know the biggest bubblegum bubble ever recorded measured over 20 inches across, roughly the size of a beach ball? Bubblegum has entertained kids and adults for nearly a century, but very few people actually know what's inside that stretchy, chewy pink stick, or how it's engineered to blow the perfect bubble without tearing. Let's find out. Chewing gum itself dates back centuries, with ancient civilizations chewing tree resins and tar long before modern gum existed. But bubblegum specifically was invented in 1928 by Walter Deemer, an accountant at the Fleer Chewing Gum Company, who was actually experimenting with gum recipes in his spare time. His formula happened to be less sticky and more elastic than regular chewing gum, perfect for blowing bubbles, and he colored it pink simply because that was the only food dye he had on hand at the time. That accidental color choice is why bubblegum is still pink today. Step 1. The gum base. Everything starts with gum base, the chewy, stretchy foundation of every piece of bubblegum. Modern gum base is a blend of food-grade synthetic elastomers, resins, waxes, and softeners, cooked and blended together in large heated kettles until they form a smooth, uniform, rubbery mass. This is fundamentally different from the ingredients in most candy. Gum base isn't meant to dissolve or break down when you chew it. It's engineered specifically to stay intact and elastic in your mouth for as long as you want to chew it. Step 2. Melting and mixing. The solid gum base is melted down in industrial mixers, not unlike massive dough mixers, and heated to a precise temperature that keeps it pliable without breaking down its elastic structure. Once melted, powdered sugar, corn syrup, and softening agents are slowly added and kneaded in, transforming the rubbery base into a soft, workable dough. This mixing stage alone can take upwards of 20 minutes, ensuring every pocket of the dough has the same texture, with no dry or overly sticky patches. Step 3. Flavoring. Next comes flavor, and this step happens surprisingly late in the process. Concentrated flavor oils, often fruit flavors like watermelon or the classic original bubblegum flavor, are blended into the dough along with additional sweeteners. Bubblegum flavor is famously short-lived while chewing, and that's intentional. The flavor oils are designed to sit close to the surface of the gum rather than deep within the base, so they release quickly in the first minute of chewing, then fade, encouraging the classic experience of gum tasting incredible for 60 seconds, and then, well, a lot less exciting after that. Step 4. Rolling and sheeting. The finished gum dough is fed through a series of rollers that gradually flatten it into a long, continuous, uniform sheet. similar in concept to rolling out cookie dough. Step 5. Cutting and shaping. Depending on the final product, the sheeted gum is cut into shape using different methods. For stick-style bubblegum, rotating blades slice the sheet into long, even rectangular sticks. Step 6. Wrapping and packaging. Once cooled, high-speed wrapping machines fold each individual stick or piece into wax paper or foil wrappers, sealing them at both ends. From there, wrapped pieces are grouped and packed into the familiar cardboard packs or plastic tubs, sealed and boxed for shipping. Some factories can wrap and package well over 1,000 pieces of gum every single minute across a single line. So, what's your personal record bubble size? And more importantly, pink or blue raspberry? Let us know in the comments. Many of the companies behind these products have also made public commitments toward more sustainable production, from sourcing tomatoes and corn through more water-efficient farming practices, to reducing packaging waste and cutting energy use across their factories, as consumer demand for transparency around how food is made continues to grow. Which one surprised you the most, the condiment or the gum? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey behind the everyday products in your pantry, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Factorify. There's always more hiding behind the label.